There's a saying that India's history isn't written on paper, it's woven into cloth. Every thread spun here has carried a piece of our civilization, from the hands of the Indus Valley artisans to the whir of modern textile mills. This isn't just about fabric, it's about power, economy, and identity, and how, for centuries, textile defined who ruled and who rebelled. Let's start at the very beginning. Around the year 2500, the people of the Indus Valley were already spinning cotton, centuries before the rest of the world even realized that you could. Archaeologists found spindle whorls, cotton fragments, and even impressions of woven cloth on clay from sites like Harappa and Mohenjo-daro. And these weren't primitive experiments. The cotton was hand-spun, hand-woven, and dyed using natural pigments. Proof that even in prehistory, Indian textile craftsmanship was unmatched. By the time that the Rig Veda was being composed, fabric didn't remain a necessity. It became a symbol. Priests wore finely woven garments, traders dealt in cloth, and women used fabric to signify status, region, and ritual. And then came India's first golden age of textiles, when weavers became storytellers. During the modern and Gupta periods, silk from China and cotton from Bengal traveled along ancient trade routes to Greece, Rome, and beyond. Foreign writers speak of woven winds and cloth so fine that it could pass through a ring. That was muslin, Bengal's legendary treasure. A single sari could take months to weave, each strand so delicate it looked like sunlight trapped in a thread. By the way, if you're liking the video so far, please consider subscribing. It doesn't cost you anything, but it really helps our content reach a wider audience. By the medieval periods, Indian textiles weren't just admired, they became a currency. Ports like Surat and Masulipatam saw whole ships loaded with chintz, jamdani, and brocades sail out to Arabia, Africa, and Europe. And then when the Mughals came, they elevated textile art to royal heights. Under Akbar, weaving centers were established for brocades, velvets, and fine muslin. Each region developed a signature weave: Banarasi from Banaras, Patola from Gujarat, Ikkat from Odisha. You get the gist of it. And the beauty was that every motif carried a certain meaning to it. Parrots, lotuses, and fish were not just decoration, they were symbols of fertility, love, and prosperity. But as Indian fabric conquered the world, another empire began to take notice: Britain. By the 17th century, British merchants from the East India Company realized that Indian cottons and silks were unbeatable. They flooded Europe, and suddenly everyone wanted calico and chintz. British weavers simply could not compete. Their wool was too heavy and their dyes were too dull. And so they protested. In fact, in 1700 and 1721, the British Parliament passed laws banning the import of Indian cotton and silks because their own weavers were rioting on the streets, angry that the Indian fabric had destroyed their livelihood. Imagine that, Indian weavers were so good that Britain had to outlaw our cloth to save its own industry. But Britain wasn't about to give up. Once they consolidated power and the Industrial Revolution began, they changed their strategy completely. Instead of importing Indian textiles, they imported raw Indian cotton and sold machine-made cotton back to India. Mills from Manchester and Lancashire produced out cheap imitations of Indian prints, while Bengal's handlooms went completely silent. The same Dhaka muslin that once wrapped emperors now had no buyers left. India's textile dominance was systematically dismantled. British policies imposed heavy taxes on Indian fabrics while allowing for duty-free imports from Manchester. Bengal's textile centers, once thriving with looms, now turned into complete ghost towns. Even British economists like William Digby later admitted that India's industrial death wasn't natural, it was orchestrated. But oppression sparks resistance. By the late 19th century, as the Swadeshi movement rose, cloth became a huge weapon. Gandhi understood symbolism. When he spun cotton on the charkha, he wasn't just weaving yarn, he was weaving independence. Khadi became a statement, a rejection of Manchester mills and a reclamation of self-reliance. For centuries, the British had turned our cloth into their profit. Gandhi turned it back into our pride. Say what you will about the guy. I'm personally not a big believer, but damn, throws cooking alright. Post-independence, the textile industry had to rebuild from the ruins. Mills came up in Ahmedabad, Mumbai, and Coimbatore, while handloom clusters revived in Varanasi, Kanchipuram, and Bhuj. But the struggle never really ended. Industrialization brought mass production, and globalization brought competition. Yet some things have survived using evolution. Walk through any Indian marketplace today and you will find artisans dyeing, spinning, and weaving clothes, keeping alive a skill that has outlived empires. Today, India's textile industry stands as the second largest in the world, not just in volume but in legacy. from organic cotton in Tamil Nadu to silk in Assam, from fashion runways in Delhi to handlooms in Varanasi. The threads of history are everywhere. And even as the machines hum, the soul of this craft still belongs into human hands. Because when you really think about it, the story behind Indian textiles isn't about fabric at all. It's about resilience and adaptation. Civilizations rose, empires fell, and economies collapsed. But the looms have always kept running. I've said this in a previous video, but the same hands that once spun for royalty now spin for the runways and a free nation. That's not just our history, it's our heritage. Alright, that was a very brief history of the Indian textile industry and fabric. If you have any more thoughts about this video, comment them down below, and I will see you in the next one.